Okay, guys, welcome to this fairly brief rundown of the slides from last week, session 2. These were the slides I showed you at the start of the practical session, the basketball practical. So I'm just going to again show them here, but with me kind of chatting over the top. So if you remember, the idea here was of this session was for us to show you the big picture, which was to start to think about how the task that we've set you in terms of the more abstract theorizing about your sport and conceptualizing your sport, and how that trickles down, translates into actually how you might coach on the ground or for me on the court. So that was the idea of the session. The first slide that I showed you was this one, which for me is kind of like the assessment task in a nutshell, or the presentation task that is in a nutshell. So we had the idea is that you create a tactical, technical, mental model. So that's you trying to simplify the demands of your sport. And again, we'll talk more about this in week 3. But essentially, once you've been able to do that, we talked about all sports being very, very complex. And good coaches can do that. Good coaches can simplify the complexity. And once you can do that, it gives you a model or a framework to create a performance model. And again, as I said, this is a kind of a description of target performance. So, if you were a coach in an academy, you would need a view on the kinds of players you were trying to produce and what kind of things that they will be able to do once reaching the end of a program. So the performance model is that really. It's a purely descriptive piece to say this is the type of player or the type of athlete that we're trying to produce, and they would play the game or the sport in this particular way. Once you've done that, again, it gives you kind of the peak of the pyramid, and you can around which you can start to build a curriculum. So the curriculum then is um, it's the scaffolding for the journey towards the performance model. And again, a curriculum might contain lots and lots of different things, but for me, some kind of key components would be learning outcomes, and they might just be on an annual basis. So you might have a series of, say, tactical learning outcomes, things or decisions that you might want players to be able to make or athletes to be able to make. Some core tasks or some activities that are going to allow them to meet those outcomes. And then threshold concepts. So those are the things that you'll be trying to teach in order to get them from one level to the next. Okay, so again, I gave you quite a few examples of those in the sessions, and I'll show you some more of those in a moment. So that's basically the overview of the whole assessment task for the presentation. Looking at the mental model in particular, we talked about this being, sports being complex systems, lots of things going on. So a model of that system is quite useful. And John Lyle says here, a model is a component of a complex system and the relationships between them. So that's kind of one of the things that we need to do, is to start to talk about the relationship between the tactical concepts and technical concepts, for example, or technical and physical. So that's really helpful. They're useful. Having a mental model is useful for a number of ways. As Weber talks about here, it helps people make sense of situations. So sport, there's lots of things going on all the time. You think about a tennis match, think about your different positions on the court you might be, different kind of shots you're going to face, different game situations, and so on and so forth. So the model helps us basically select appropriate actions in a given situation. So to read situations and to react appropriately, read and react. Research in this area, not just from sport but from like business as well, has shows that successful teams have clear, coherent, shared mental models. So where the coach and the players, for example, share the same vision about the way that the game is played. So having a mental model, making it clear, sharing it, and having people buy in, we know is beneficial. As an example of this, I just re-showed again what I showed from week 1, which was this very simple model of boxing. Again, we'll come back to that in week 3. We'll see actually how this was put together. So again, here, boxing is relatively simple sport, but it's still much more complex than what's on the screen. So this is just my attempt to say these are the main problems that a boxer would face during a match. I then showed you my attempt to do the same for basketball. So basketball, there are more problems, slightly more complex. And I showed you this sort of typical attack defense, moments of the game type model that I've developed, where the problems, offensive problems, are paired with defensive problems. So, for example, if the offensive team is in the kind of keep possession mode, which it would only be for a few seconds, perhaps in any given offense, if you're in keep possession mode, the defense is probably in a pressure the ball mode. So if you realize somebody's just trying to keep possession, you need to get pressure on the ball to take it away from them, and so on and so forth. So these are pairs of sequential tactical problems. Now we can overlay on top of that, and again, if this might we just take a kind of horizontal slice for beginners, we could overlay on top of that then some techniques that they would need in order to solve those problems. So again, if we look at the kind of keep possession bit here, what I'm saying is at under 12s or beginners level, we want people to be able to catch and stop, pivot, triple threat, and dribble just to be able to keep possession of the ball. And then obviously there's a whole series of additional techniques that we'd need to move the ball up court and ultimately to penetrate and score. And this was the one, this is the sort of area that we focused on in the practical session. So we were thinking about this problem, solving this problem using the jump shot technique and developing the jump shot technique. And this link here on the slide takes you to the performance model that I showed you. So I printed these out on A3 if you remember, and I showed you those. And again, that was just a description. So if this is the under 12s, here's a link to like what we expect of senior players, but again against these problem areas. The final thing that I showed you was this idea of threshold concepts. So remember, if I said the curriculum is based around learning outcomes, so having a set of outcomes, say for the year or a season, some core activities to help people meet the outcomes. So obviously some of the core activities I delivered in the session would have been like the warm up and the flavouring the warm up for this element, catch, move, shot, ready, feet, and then the game points Ryan is a game, a core activity I would use throughout the course of the season, and the drills, again the shooting drills that we focused on, the 2-spot drill and the 4-ball drill would again be kind of core activities. But obviously there's no point giving people activities and expecting them to do things without actually teaching them something. So threshold concepts is the idea that in each kind of, and this is just a technical one, so for the technique of the jump shot, there's a series of sequential threshold concepts. So for beginners, the very, very first thing, if you like, the roots, I use this tree analogy, the roots of the technique are in the feet, so making sure that when you catch the ball, your feet are in a shooting ready position. So feet pointing at the basket, shoulder width apart, on balance, balls at the feet. So we focus a lot on feet there. Building from that, we then look at the shooting pocket, so where the ball is actually received and making sure we can receive it again in a position ready to shoot. And we extended that for 1 or 2 players over the day, so where we looked at the dribble, so getting the ball into the pocket off the dribble. Beyond that, again, there's a series, so I won't go into them all, but the idea is that there's a sequence here, so I would want to make sure that players had understood each threshold concept before moving on to the next one, and that way building the technique from solid foundations. And the bit at the top there, so we did look at a little bit of video of Steph Curry. We can look at really, really good plays in terms of the performance model.
This season, Steph Curry made more threes
and just some of the things
than any player in NBA history. And this postseason, his play has been the story of the playoffs.
Angle of release and so on and so forth. So those things are described here. So this is the performance model element, if you like, for the jump shot. So I'm saying we need a rapid release off the catch, off the dribble, both hands, around 0.6 per second. A high release, 50-55 degrees, repeatable, and with a certain level of success. So we can describe what we would want from very, very good senior players. And hopefully, if we do teach these things in the right order and embed them, then that's what we end up end up with at the end. So that's just covering the slides, guys. Hopefully this is a useful recap for you if you wanted to check in on any of the stuff we covered on Friday. But obviously the experience of the session themselves and the discussions we had would have been invaluable anyway, I would hope. So yeah, hopefully that's useful, and you can come back to this and revise at any time.